Ugh, I spend all this time setting up where I'm going to put the camera, and then every time I hit record, the screen gets smaller and the framing changes, and I always forget this. Welcome back to everybody's favorite news recap rant sesh girl doesn't know what she's talking about YouTube channel. Thank you so much. I just passed 100 subscribers, which is very exciting because growth on YouTube is extremely slow. My birthday just passed, so that was a very fun little birthday gift. And speaking of national holidays that happen in the month of February, today we are going to be talking about the Super Bowl and specifically what sport is played in the Super Bowl, which is football, the American kind, not the kind that every other country plays. Football has been making the headlines recently, not just because of the upcoming Super Bowl, but because after what happened to Buffalo Bills player Damar Hamlin, there are renewed concerns about the dangers of football. So today I want to talk a little bit about the dangers of football and what specifically happened to Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin, and why it's important to have this national conversation, but at the same time, why I think we need to skew the conversation in a different direction. Disclaimer, Layla and I are Steelers fans, as you can tell by the little display in the background. We will be rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles in this year's Super Bowl. I lived in Philly for 4 years, and the Eagles won the Super Bowl the year before I moved to Philly, and they are now in the Super Bowl again the year after I moved out of Philly. So I have some mixed feelings about them being in the Super Bowl. My NFL teams go from Pittsburgh Steelers to the Philadelphia Eagles, and then in third place, my favorite team is Joe Burrow. That man is so beautiful. And as always, the other disclaimers, I'm still very new at this, so any feedback you have, I very much appreciate, and I also appreciate your patience as I navigate this very new territory, and I am by no means an expert. Some of you watching this might know me as a sports girly. I played sports for a lot of my life. I was very devoted to sports. I myself have suffered numerous injuries due to sports. And others of you might be watching this and be like, what the heck? Why is Alex talking about sports? She doesn't even like sports. I don't really know how I feel about sports. I think in a perfect world, I would be a sports fan, but in my own personal opinion, there's just too many issues with the way that we deal with sports in the United States. Granted, that's not what this video is about, but I just wanted to put that out there so you know where I am coming from as we talk about this issue. But regardless of my own personal feelings, I do think it's important to identify the actual dangers that come with playing football and other sports for that matter. Let's get this show on the road. Today, we're going to be breaking this video into 5 separate parts. Very briefly, we're going to talk about what is the Super Bowl for people who don't know. Then we're going to talk about Damar Hamlin and what happened to him a couple weeks ago, how safe is the NFL or not safe, what the most discussed injury when it comes to football is, and then lastly, we're going to talk about how these injuries are present in the world of youth sports. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to be pulling some comments from my Instagram about things you all wanted to know about the dangers of football. First of all, to anyone who is living under a rock, hates sports, is living in another country, or is from another country, let's talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is the national championship game that happens every year in the NFL or the National Football League. The top team from the NFC or National Football Conference and the top team from the AFC or American Football Conference play each other in the final game of the year. The Super Bowl is known for its halftime show. This year, the Queen, Rihanna, will be performing, as well as the commercials that are put on throughout the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is a very big deal in the United States. It is estimated that at least 100 million people watch every year, and by some estimations, 200 million people watch every year. To put that in perspective, there are about 330 million people in the United States, so if I do some quick math, that's about 1/3 of all of the people in the United States who tune in to the Super Bowl every year. That's part of the reason why the ads are so big and why they got an amazing performer like Rihanna for the halftime show. So as much as the Super Bowl is about football itself, it's really just an American institution, and it's a huge part of the culture, whether you tune into it or not. So the fact that the Super Bowl is such a huge deal, I think it's really important to acknowledge the lived experience of the people who play in the Super Bowl. They are put on a pedestal for pretty much the entire country to see, and as much as football might be entertaining to watch, it is also extremely dangerous dangerous to play. The entire country got a glimpse of just how dangerous football can be a couple weeks ago when Damar Hamlin went into cardiac arrest on the field during the Bills-Bengals Monday Night Football game. This was not a playoff football game, but it did have playoff implications. And since it was a Monday Night Football game, it was widely watched. It was the only NFL game on that night. Damar's injury happened during the first quarter of the game. If you have not seen the video, when Damar Hamlin performed what was seemingly a routine tackle on a Bengals player, he fell to the ground in the tackle and then got up and almost immediately collapsed. Medics rushed the field and performed CPR, and both Bills and Bengals players surrounded Damar to shield what was happening from the public. And although it hasn't been officially confirmed, a lot of heart experts believe that what happened to Damar Hamlin is something called commotio cordis. Now, this happens in people who don't have any history of heart disease. There's nothing wrong with their heart. But when a perfectly healthy heart is hit at just the right moment, it can launch into an abnormal and sometimes deadly rhythm. This has nothing to do with the strength of the chest impact, but rather the timing of it, as the heart has a rhythmic beating, and if a hit interrupts that beating, commotio cordis can occur. Another disclaimer that I didn't do at the start of this video: I am not a doctor. I am not a health expert. All this information I got from the sources that are linked below. If I say something that is wrong, please correct me. Another interesting thing about commotio cordis is it's much more common in adolescence because your ribs harden with age. So adolescents who play sports are much more likely to experience commotio cordis than someone who is older and has a stronger rib cage to protect their heart. And then again, commotio cordis is extremely rare, especially when it happens in sports, and it is more likely to happen in sports like baseball, softball, and hockey when not a projectile, but when a ball or a puck hits your chest as opposed to a physical impact of a tackle or another person. Experts believe that commotio cordis happens in instances like it did potentially with Damar Hamlin about 20 times a year in the United States. So, like I said, not super common, but super scary nonetheless. Medical experts immediately rushed the field upon Damar's collapse, and they treated him for 19 minutes before he was escorted away on a stretcher. 19 minutes is a long time to deal with someone on the field, but for every 1 minute that CPR is not performed on someone who has gone into cardiac arrest, their chances of survival decrease by 10%. So medical experts had to make sure that Damar's heart was beating properly before they escorted him to the hospital. You can't see her right now, but Layla is on the opposite side of the camera, like she is the camera operator. Let's see if I can get this video. Please forgive my laundry basket. Layla, what do you have to say to the camera? Look at her. She is freaking watching the show as it happens. Usually she sits on this side and sits on my lap, but I guess today she wants to see how it's all happening. So some people are saying that the football field during an NFL game was the safest place for Damar Hamlin to be because there were 30 medical experts who were able to restore his heart beating as fast as possible. And at the same time, other people are saying, well, if Damar Hamlin hadn't made this tackle and wasn't playing in an NFL game, he never would have gone into cardiac arrest in the first place. And based on all the information we have, it seems like both of these things are true. And for the NFL's credit, comparatively speaking, they are as safe as they can be. The little tapestry thing that I have hanging behind me with the Steelers helmets shows the progression of helmets throughout the years. There has been immense progress in the protection of the players, but that doesn't mean that the game is any less dangerous. Athletes have comprehensive physicals every single year. As much as we're talking right now about cardiac arrest, and we will be talking about another really dangerous injury in football, concussions, orthopedic injuries are the most common type of injury in football. And I'm talking about broken fingers, torn ACLs, and sprained ankles. And on record, the only player to die during an NFL game was Chuck Hughes. He passed away from cardiac arrest in 1971 during an NFL game. The NFL has repeatedly said that it prioritizes safety for its players, and it is continuously working to improve it. There are extensive medical staff present at every single NFL game, and they have even added penalties to the game for dangerous behavior, like when two players ram their helmets together. But the NFL has come under scrutiny time and time again for dangers the game poses to players. This past season, we saw Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa suffer multiple head injuries throughout the season. And before Damar Hamlin went into cardiac arrest, that was the biggest health news from the NFL this past season. And Tua Tagovailoa, his case was really interesting because perhaps the biggest health story when it comes to the NFL is concussions and something called CTE. CTE stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Encephalopathy. I think I'm saying that right. Again, not a health expert. CTE stands for chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which can be caused by repeated blows to the head. CTE has been identified in football players, boxers, as well as military personnel. Anyone who has suffered consistent head trauma is at risk for CTE. But the same way that a lifelong smoker may or may not get lung cancer, someone who has suffered multiple concussions may or may not suffer from CTE. The signs and symptoms of CTE vary. There has been increased risk for depression and anxiety and even suicidal ideation in people with CTE, as well as increased aggression and a more difficult ability to control and maintain emotions. And lastly, CTE can result in difficulty thinking, as well as memory loss. Layla, I think she needs to go outside to pee. So we will be right back. Layla, you want to go pee-pee? You want to go for a walk? Come here. Let's go. I'll be right back. Let me go get her leash. Ugh. I can't tell if she wants to go for a walk or just needs more attention. Layla, come here. Let's go for walkies. Come here. Layla, we're gonna go pee-pees. Gonna go pee-pees, and then I'll finish recording the video. Isn't red her color? Doesn't she look so good in red? Say hello to the camera. Hello! We're gonna go for walkies. We'll be right back. Mission accomplished, right, Layla? Where the heck were we? I think we were talking a little bit about the signs and symptoms of CTE. There's a wide range of signs and symptoms because we're talking about brain trauma here. And your brain, well, it's pretty important. It controls pretty much all the executive functioning in your body, right? I don't know that much about the brain. It's been a long time since I took a psych class, but I do know that. Symptoms of CTE can often be misconstrued or misdiagnosed as Alzheimer's, ALS, or even Parkinson's disease, or just regular old dementia. Another interesting fact about CTE is, let's say a person experiences a lot of brain and head trauma in their 20s. They won't experience symptoms of CTE until they're much older. We're talking like late 50s. It could take decades for these symptoms of CTE to be expressed. There's still a lot that needs to be learned about CTE. Part of the reason why we don't have more information on it is it can only be diagnosed after death when the brain is examined. That was also the case with Alzheimer's for years, and both CTE and Alzheimer's are categorized by a buildup of a protein that's called tau, but the accumulations are very different when it comes to Alzheimer's and when it comes to CTE. But the accumulations of the buildup of that protein are very different in brains with Alzheimer's and brains with CTE. There is no treatment for CTE yet. So the best way to treat CTE, I guess, is to prevent it from even happening in the first place. So that would be concussion protocols and stronger helmets if we're talking about football, which we are talking about. So this whole video, I have been talking about the safety of football because football is a hot topic right now with what happened to Damar Hamlin and the Super Bowl coming up. But the truth of the matter is all sports are dangerous. There are plenty of sports that, logistically speaking, could be considered to be more dangerous than football, like horseback riding or rock climbing or mountain biking or even cheerleading. Every sport poses different risks. But overall, the most dangerous sports when you look at the numbers are youth sports. When you think about it, youth sports are much more common than professional sports. Pretty much every single one of us played some sort of sport growing up. And even though youth sports, the hits aren't as as hard whether a soccer ball hits someone in the chest or a tackle is made. Adolescents aren't as developed physically to protect themselves from these injuries. So in the instance of commotio cordis, a 14-year-old who's playing tackle football, the impact might not be as strong, but their ribs are not as hardened to protect their heart. And young athletes are still developing mentally and emotionally. The trauma, as someone who has experienced injuries from sports, let me tell you, the mental and emotional toll is almost harder than the physical one sometimes. That can be a lot for a young child or a teenager to deal with. And most importantly, probably the reason why there's such a big risk for youth sports, such a danger for youth sports, they are not equipped to the level that the NFL and other professional sports leagues are equipped. There are not 30 medical experts on the field at any given time. And that's why it's so important for all of us to stay educated on these topics, because if you have kids someday, if you are a kid, I don't know why you're watching this, or if you're present at a youth sports game at some point, you could save someone's life if you know CPR. And we should all just be aware of the potential risk. That doesn't mean no one should ever play sports, because again, the risk is very slim. But a risk at all is super scary. And if it happens to you or someone you know, you probably are going to wish that you could have done something to prevent it. So I guess I just wanted to do this video maybe for the same reason that Damar Hamlin has been posting about on his Instagram. Sports can be a great way to unite people. They encourage exercise, they encourage leadership, they encourage team building, but also they pose dangers to some people. And if there's any way that we can prevent those dangers from happening in the first place, I've had 2 ACL surgeries in my life. And something that I was told is that there's no money in the prevention of ACL tears. There's only money in the rehabilitation. Because when you tear your ACL, you have a very expensive surgery. You've got approximately 9 months of physical therapy if you're going back to playing a very high intensity sport. But if you prevented that from happening in the first place, there's several jobs and several thousands of dollars that will never have been made. And no one is pouring money into the prevention of it because there's an entire business. We all know someone who has torn an ACL. I mean, if you're watching this video right now, you know someone who's torn 2. So I think that is the same instance, as sad as it is, we see on the field or on the court or on the track all across the country. And sports, as much as they are a money-making scheme for a lot of people, no one should have to profit off the pain of someone else. And if we can prevent the physical, mental, emotional trauma before it happens, and you as someone who doesn't play sports or does play sports can have a hand in saving someone's life, I don't know. I think that's pretty special and pretty important. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my Instagram and pull some comments from my most recent story. I got a lot of comments, so I'm not going to go through all of them. I think I'm probably going to pull 3. Okay, so someone commented, obviously I know there's physical dangers, but I want to know the consequences of playing football on mental health specifically. So this is a really great comment. I touched on this a little bit already, but I think it's important to acknowledge when you are playing sports at a high level, when you are doing anything at a high level on a national scale, there is going to be increased stress on you, physically and mentally. There's been a lot of talk about football specifically having an ultra masculine culture that perpetuates the norm of men don't cry and you stuffing your feelings down, being told to suck it up and push through the pain. To the NFL's credit, they have done a lot to combat the stigma, launching wellness programs, and most teams have a team psychologist. And there's been several NFL players who have opened up publicly about their mental health. Another important thing to acknowledge when it comes to mental health is eating disorders are a huge part of athletic culture, especially when it comes to sports like wrestling. And the last thing I'll say about mental health is CTE and concussions are known to significantly decrease the quality of a player's mental health. It leads to depression and anxiety, and there's even been instances of players completing suicide, and then it was learned that they had CTE. Okay, this person wants to know about long-term rates of cognitive impairment. So this is tricky to answer because, relatively speaking, football is a new sport, and the discussion of concussions and cognitive impairment is even newer. And on top of that, it's really hard to diagnose things like CTE. But according to a Harvard study, now this is just one study and one source, but having a long career in the NFL significantly increased the risk of cognitive impairment and depression later in life. For every 5 years of an NFL player's career, risk of cognitive impairment increases by 20%, and a risk of depression increases by 9%. And considering the fact that the average NFL career is only around 3.5 years, and as much as that short time span is definitely due to injuries, it also has to do with burnout. When you're playing sports at the highest level, that is an extreme mental toll. Okay. I'm going to share one more comment. I'm not going to share this person's name or any identifying information, and I just want to say thank you to the person who shared this. They said, "My dad played football all of high school and college. Just before he turned 50, he got diagnosed with early onset Lewy body dementia. It's basically dementia, but way worse. He got tons of concussions in high school and college." Now, this is something that I did not discover in my research, so I just looked it up, and this is so sad. Lewy body dementia signs and symptoms can include visual hallucinations, movement disorders like Parkinson's disease, poor regulation of your body functions like your automatic nervous system, which means your blood pressure, your pulse, sweating, your digestive system, cognitive problems that you might see in Alzheimer's disease, difficulty sleeping, issues with fluctuating attention, and then depression and apathy. This is exactly why I wanted to do this video. I don't really want to get emotional, but as much as sports like football can bring so much joy to so many people, they can also bring immense trauma. I think in a moment like this, ahead of one of the biggest sporting events in the United States, we all just need to take a moment to acknowledge the trauma that people will experience, and the show must go on, right? The games must continue. In the case of Damar Hamlin, the game was stopped and then postponed, and they never ended up playing again. But the NFL still goes on, right? The Bills had a game the following week. Damar Hamlin, will he ever play again? I don't know, but he might, and people will continue to play football. And this conversation isn't just about football, it's about sports in general and the culture that we have around it. And to know that there are so many people across the country that are dealing with the consequences of this sport, of this game, is something I think we all need to reckon with a little bit. It's just a lot to think about. So on that very sad note, thank you for watching this video. If you made it all the way through, please like it, comment, subscribe. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram if you want to have a comment or opinion shared in the next video. I do appreciate all the feedback. As always, Layla is still over there watching behind the camera because she is a freaking psycho. Layla, what do you have to say to our viewers? Do you have anything to say to the viewers? I will see you next week, most likely, after the Super Bowl has happened. Who are you rooting for? Let me know in the comments, and let's just hope that everyone is healthy and safe after next week's game, including Rihanna. And Layla and I will see you when we see you. I'm gonna try and throw this. Ready? Don't worry, Layla's gone. She left the room. Bye!